Here's the truth. You can learn solid tech skills for free. In this episode, we're talking about how to study on your own, the smart ways to use free courses, tutorials, books, and of course, online communities.
Let's first start by saying, Paloma, self-studying has its own time and place to do it. Because I still believe if you are breaking into tech, going the route of self-study, although possible, is very tricky, and it can leave you very lost if you don't know what you're doing. So where do you think self-study could help people the most?
I agree with you. I don't think it's the best method to break into tech. However, you will self-study.
Yes.
Like, we have to acknowledge that. Once you find that job, your first job, you will encounter situations where, let's say you interview and you hear that they use a random technology, something called SALT, which is a configuration management tool that allows you to configure workloads as you want them to exist. And you'll have to learn that, or you'd be smart if you learn that before your first day of work, because you'll show up ready to like plug and play as you get there. So I think once you get your job, and even as you're growing your career, there'll be a lot of self-study. One of the things I've mentioned before is that we're considered change makers in our organizations. So our organizations are constantly going to be evaluating and purchasing new technology. And guess what? It's a sysadmin or an engineer that's going to figure out how to use that tool in the environment. So sometimes you will even be given time at work to go and learn this new technology that they want to implement.
Yeah. So how do you go about self-studying?
Okay. So I'd like to choose like a subject and then work from that perspective. So let's say your environment, you get a job and you hear that they want to that most of their code is written in Python. So even if they don't expect you to write Python, you'll have to run Python scripts. You'll have to maybe make some minor changes to those scripts. And of course, if you want to grow there in the long term, you'll have to write Python eventually. So the way I suggest you go about this is by choosing a resource. And I believe that any resource can do the job. Like, you can go to an old book. This is just one Python book, but there's many out there that are amazing. Or you could choose a course online. I don't care if it's on YouTube. I don't care if you paid $10 for it on Udemy. They exist. And you're gonna take that material or resource, and you're gonna follow it as like the scaffolding, that basic structure for what you're gonna do in the future. You guys can visualize like a building with the scaffolding, right? So it just tells you there's gonna be a door here, there's gonna be a wall there, right? So I would take, let's say, a book, and I would look at it and see, okay, this has 18 chapters. I'm expected to know Python basics, flow control, functions, lists, dictionaries, and so on. So I'll see each chapter as a module, and then I'll make a plan for this and say, okay, I think with the amount of time I have right now, I can cover about one chapter a week. And of course, you should look at like how many pages. Maybe you say, okay, this module on functions is longer than the rest. Maybe I'll spend 2 weeks there.
So you treat it like a real class?
I schedule it. So I look at my calendar and I see, okay, I can commit to doing this Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and perhaps I can put in a little more time on Sundays.
Yeah.
That way, I know how I'm going to structure my day and my time and how I'm going to actually make this happen in 18 weeks and 6 weeks, or even in 3 weeks if your next job starts in 3 weeks. And another thing I'd like to mention is that just because I choose to follow this book, it doesn't mean that that's the only resource I can use. Like, if I don't get the way this author explains functions, or maybe like that's just not clicking, everything else clicked but functions didn't, I can go to YouTube, I can make searches online, and we'll talk about some other material.
Yeah, but you have to be careful. But you can go online to get more resources about that particular topic, but you have to still stay on topic.
Yes.
It's very important.
Yes.
If not, you're going to be all over the place.
Yes. So one thing is to supplement one course with another material, but another thing is to start registering in different courses, right?
Yeah.
So let's say if you're stuck on functions, you should just be looking for materials that explain functions.
Yeah.
Not like saying, oh, maybe this other course that my friend is doing is better than this book I got. No, my advice to you is that you stick to the first one you chose and you work up from there. Once you finish that, you can even take another one, which I have done in particular with coding, because you'll notice that some things just don't click and you weren't ready to understand them neither.
How about taking notes, especially when you're not learning this to go past a cert? How you go about taking notes, keeping track of clean notes, to help your study?
Yeah, you want to start like creating your own little database of tips, tricks, even code snippets of things you write and things you see. Put footnotes on the code so that you understand what it's doing, or comment it inside the same file. Another thing that I suggest is that you make an effort to put things in your own words. And this is tied to teaching what you learn. So that could be by helping somebody else, or it could be by writing articles on it, or just
writing a blog.
Yeah. And that will also help you with your
personal
personal brand.
Because I see you do that.
I do that.
Yeah. And it ties to also to trying to find a community that is already learning what you're trying to learn. And when I talk about community, I also mean local communities, because a lot of people think technology, they only think online communities, but you can find local people around you who are looking to actually work with people. So meetup.com is a good place to do that.
Yeah. Depending on what you're learning, sometimes even local libraries will have a random meetup that meets once a month, and it's not necessarily on Meetup. So I would just look up, let's say if you want to learn Python, look at Python and your city name, and you'll find some communities. If you're in a big city, there may be a bunch of them. So you'll be able to see like, hey, does this group meet every Tuesday? Maybe this other one meets Wednesday. So you see which one works for you. That's a good place to start meeting people, obviously, and that who can potentially become mentors, who can help you if you're stuck on something. It's very common on those coding and technology meetups to show up with a project and just tell people, hey, this is what I've been working on, and they'll tell you how they went about learning, how they went about growing their skills.
Yeah, and it ties back to the idea of the more you are able to explain the concept to someone else, the more likely you are to grasp it better.
Yep.
So in the meetups, you're gonna find people who are further than you, and you're gonna find people who need explaining on some concept you already grasp. So it's the best time to actually do that.
And meetups are super friendly.
Yeah, and another thing I I encourage is that despite the fact that technology is all about being online, about remote working, there's nothing that replaces human connection, human interaction, face to face when it's time to learn. So that's one thing you should
agree
consider.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, you can look for local events happening. So it's very common, again, especially if you're in a big city, that you'll find that vendors. So let's say you're trying to learn AWS or Red Hat or about Oracle databases. The vendor, the company that makes that technology, will organize conferences, training events.
Yeah, for example, in 2025, Yellowtail Tech will be sponsoring a GovTech Con in the DMV area. And there's going to be a lot of workshop around Linux, around automation,
hackathons
around Ansible. So these are the kind of things also that can help you when it's time to not only self-study, but create your network to actually do the self-studying that needs to happen.
That's true. So again, as I've been saying, you're not always going to find those groups in your local community, especially if you're not in a tech hub, in a city that's a tech hub.
Or a big city in general.
Exactly. So that shouldn't make you hopeless. There are, again, these vendors know that. They know there's talent all over the country. There's employees all over the country or all over the world. So it's very normal for them to have online events too. Of course, in the online events, you do not have that physical contact with people, so it's harder to establish relationships. And the way I like to go about it is, let's say I go to a Women Who Code event, and that's online, and I see that somebody from California, from the other opposite of the country, is presenting about DevOps. Well, I search for them on LinkedIn and I follow them, or I see if they're on social media. Sometimes they're on Instagram or Twitter or X. So you can look for them there, try to connect, and just keep in touch and keep stay aware of what they're doing. And sometimes you can build relationships like that. Going back to how to structure that study plan, you need to create a routine. So you're gonna go and learn about these things. So that could be reading up, watching the videos, but you also have to do practical work.
Yeah.
So that's like the second level. Once you understand the concepts, you should be doing exercises. You should be putting together labs.
Yeah, and one thing I keep hearing you talk about is routine and the word should, which really is tied to the commitment level the person brings into the process. And this whole self-studying cannot happen with a high level of commitment. So that's also why, although we're talking about self-studying, we're doing it with a lot of caution, because it requires a level of discipline that a lot of people have not been practicing. So it's with a lot of caution. So you need to have a routine. You need to have a framework on how you're going to go about not only just self-studying, because we talked about that already. We all can kind of study something, and there's a big difference between knowing a little bit about a material and actually knowing it enough to call yourself a subject matter expert, or to be called on at work.
To become that person that masters the tool at work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's basically what I think in general for self-study. First, I really think it's best used for continuous learning. So if you are breaking into tech, I still recommend a more structured environment, because what that structured environment does is it actually does the pre-work for you. It helps you not go in too many different directions. It chooses what's important for you, and then you go in, you learn, and not only a predetermined pace, you have a community usually.
You have accountability.
You have accountability already built into the process. You have a community to go to. You have a framework to follow. So you have resources already available to you. So self-study is good even if you are in a cohort-based environment, because despite the fact that you are in a cohort-based environment, just like you said, some particular concept might not be clear. You might have to go outside of your cohort setup to find some additional explanation, but you have somewhere to come back to. You see?
Center you again.
Exactly. That's the first thing. And if you have any plans on growing in your career, so continuous learning is part of that plan. So you're gonna have to do some self-learning anyway in your job. So that's how I would consider self-learning. Very important, but more as a add-on to your learning.